multiple, and how do I bring my presentation to the screen?
You have to use the share screen on the bottom row, the green.
Okay, yeah, now. So now my screen is there, I guess.
It will come. Yes, it is there.
Okay. Yeah, so good morning, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Malhotra Mehrotra for, sorry, nice introduction. Uh, this topic is quite vast, so I don't know in 40 minutes how much I will be able to talk, but I will just try to give a glimpse of it. And uh, usually how we start is many of you have, because Lucknow is very close, so many of you have already visited, but I will just show you IIT Kanpur, just to show that we have uh, many facilities that are there: Advanced Center of Material Science, Advanced Imaging, and then Samtel Display Center. So basically, and already there is a lot of collaboration going on between KGMU and IIT Kanpur. So uh, there are a lot of other possibilities that can be explored. So moving forward, my screen got, yeah. So these are some of the facilities. Earlier it was called 4i Lab. Now it's renamed as Imagineering Lab. So whatever, say, devices you want to build, we have starting from turning center to polymer-based additive manufacturing machine to abrasive water jet machining center, laser scanner, everything. Then universal micro machining center within the department of mechanical engineering, EDM machine. Then recently, with the funding from DST FIST, we have procured a metal-based additive manufacturing machine. Then this is the computational space where our students, graduate students, work. These are some of the uh, facilities within the department. At Advanced Imaging Center and Advanced Center of Material Science, there are many more, but these are within the department. Now coming back to the topic, if you see, this is a picture of Auckland Bay Bridge. Looks very nice. This is how it used to look before 1989, when the earth, it was hit by an earthquake. By the way, there is a disclaimer that to make things clear and uh, attractive, a lot of sources have been borrowed, and wherever possible, I have credited the sources. So if I miss somewhere, it is unintentional. So basically, you see this uh, bridge, and there are many bridges across the country, and even in India now, you see a lot of bridges being built. So after the earthquake, the bridge looked something like this. Now, if you have to redesign, this time you would like to be sure that if it should be able to bear the seismic load. So this is how a finite element model was built to analyze the bridge under the seismic loads, right? But how, this is a very huge, large bridge, how this analysis is done, that is something we will see. So there are other examples. You have this engine and you want to do the thermal analysis, like what is the temperature distribution in the engine block. So basically you solve some differential equations in order to get the solution. Same thing, drag force analysis of aircraft. What is the drag force distribution? You can actually see right side, there is a contour plot, which is showing the drag force distribution. You have, you basically solve Navier-Stokes partial differential equations. Since you all are from medical school, I am just giving one example from the lung. So basically, the respiratory lung, if you want to tell how how does it basically, how is the motion. So you see the image of the lung through some imaging modality, and then you see that it surface mesh has been generated. What is surface meshing? We will basically talk later on. And then it has been solved, and what you see at different places, you will see the different colors, so the different amount of deformation. The maximum, the dark red one is basically 19 mm. So using finite element method, you can actually do this kind of analysis, right? I'm from manufacturing domain. The figure is not very good. It has been taken from MIT Open Courseware, but it's a vertical machining center, right? During operation, we want to see the elastic deformation, thermal behavior, and all. If you see, the geometry is very complex. So if you want to do in one go, making this kind of algebraic equations is for entire domain is very complex. So then basically what we do is that for any physical problem, we have a mathematical model which is governed by differential equations. But finite element is, it comes into picture when we have to basically solve those models. So it is a numerical technique which basically solves it. Now, how FEM actually works, let's talk about it. So as I said, that it is a method for numerical solution of field problems. Basically, these are, you can actually say the field of interest is over here. So what it does is that it cuts a large structure into several elements. So now you see on the left, bottom left, you have this structure which has been cut into several elements, right? And then these elements are reconnected at nodes. So it's like you have a piece of paper, you have different pieces of paper, and on a board, you are basically, notice board, you see that different pieces of papers are there, and then you try to connect them using, say, pin. So that's what it is. Okay, that it reconnects elements at nodes as if nodes were pins or drops of glue that hold elements together. And then for each of them, you will have algebraic equations. And then you basically, as a result, for different elements, so you will have a set of simultaneous algebraic equations. And you individually solve them. And then once you have that, then you get, say, a behavior, something like, for example, you are seeing it is a trapezoid, and then what you are seeing, trapezium, and then what you are seeing is that it has been divided into different elements, and each element has nodes. Like right now here you see triangular element, and then you solve them. So there will be three set, simultaneously you will be setting, solving three algebraic equations in this case. And then you get displacement. Once you get displacement, you can actually calculate stress, strain, whatever you want to calculate. So as I stated earlier, that many engineering phenomena can be expressed by governing equations and boundary conditions. So whether you have elastic problems, you have thermal problems, fluid flow, electrostatics, you have some sort of governing equation represented in terms of differential equation, and then some boundary condition. Now the thing is that we know that governing equation, we know the boundary conditions, as I showed the vertical machining center or the aircraft and all. But even if you know all the equations, you cannot solve it by hand. That's where FEM comes into picture. Mind it that FEM is a numerical technique, and it does not give you exact solution. It gives you approximate solution. So basically the set of algebraic equations, you can actually represent it in matrix form as K times U is equal to F. What this means, I will show in subsequent slides. So here I said that you know all the equations, but you cannot solve it by hand. This is a book, a problem from a book by K.J. Bathe from MIT. This is, he's actually very well known in this area. So what you are seeing is that there is a bracket, right? There are two bolts. It is uniform thickness, right? All the problems are given. Now, it is basically attached to a very thick steel column. Now, you want to calculate the bending moment at section AA, and you want to calculate the deflection at the pin. In order to solve it, you see you have this set of equations, but it is very difficult to solve by hand. But you can always solve it using finite element method. So how will you solve it? There are three steps: pre-processing, then processing, and post-processing. So whatever you have this, a bracket, you basically create a geometric model, a solid model using, there are a lot of softwares like SolidWorks, ProE, and AutoCAD. Then you basically make a finite element model. Then within the second step, which is processing or analysis, what you do is that, as I said, that now you divide it problem domain into non-overlapping regions, which is basically your elements, and they are connected through nodes, right? Special points, which I have already mentioned in this. If you see this schematic, so that's what you are basically doing. Then once you have this finite element method, then you describe the behavior. Then you describe the behavior of individual element. And then you describe the behavior of the entire body. So basically these three steps are the one that are the heart of the finite element method, right? And once you are basically describing the entire body, this is basically by putting together the behavior of each element, it is also known as assembly. And then you have this, you basically calculate, which is basically post-processing, the moment. This was the schematic that I showed for, especially for Bravo. You basically see pre-processing, where you basically define the geometric domain, define the element type, define the material properties, geometric properties, and all those things. Then the three steps that I mentioned: analysis. And post-processing, you basically see the result: displacement, stress, strain, natural frequency, all those things. Now, as I said that this is the equation that we saw earlier also. K times U is equal to F. F is basically action, K is the property, and U is basically your behavior. So if you know two of them, you can always determine the third one. So in terms of physical quantities, if you see, in terms of, say, elastic properties, basically, if you consider a spring, it's a stiffness. And if you apply a force, you know it's a stiffness, then you can always know how much it is going to displace. Similarly, if you apply some heat using some heat source, you know its thermal conductivity, then you can actually determine the temperature distribution. Likewise, in fluid mechanics, electrostatics. So basically, property, behavior, action, and through which we are interested in knowing the unknown, which is your behavior. Because as I said that you know the property of the spring, stiffness value, and then how much. So now you want to predict how much is the force that we apply, and then say if you apply a certain amount of force, what is the displacement you will get. So coming back to the vertical machining center. So as I mentioned that it's a large system, so it's very difficult to make algebraic equations for entire domain. So what we do, we divide it into simple small elements, right? There can be different kind of elements, 1D, 2D elements, 3D elements. And then once you have that, then you solve basically individual elements, and then you get this solution. So you see for individual elements, you have this K times U is equal to F, and then ultimately put them together, and then you get this way, the desired behavior. So this putting them together and all, this is where the softwares come into picture. You solve the equations, obtain the unknown variables, and that's why you see that computer has been put as where you have basically FEM processing. It is solved by using some softwares. Now, in order to summarize, what we have talked about is it uses the concept of piecewise polynomial interpolation. You connect the element together, and then the field quantity becomes interpolated over the entire structure in piecewise fashion. You basically get a set of simultaneous algebraic equations. So as I was saying, we have this equation for the spring. F is equal to kx, where k is the stiffness matrix, x is the displacement, F is the load. So this F is equal to k times u is something that I have been showing, but how do we actually, and then before that I showed this particular system. How does it actually puts it piecewise together? So let me just show it with two examples. I will start with one spring system and then two spring system, but this K, stiffness, you basically K is called stiffness matrix. So you must be wondering that for springs, stiffness is fine, but then why for other domains like fluid flow and heat transfer? So basically stiffness, we say somebody is stiff, it means it is resisting the change. So it is whether we are doing non-structural analysis, whether fluid flow or heat transfer, we still use the term stiffness matrix because it represents the resistance of the element to change when subjected to external influences. You apply heat and then you want to see the change. So K, the stiffness matrix, basically contains the geometric and material behavior, which basically indicates in a way the resistance to the deformation when an external load is applied. So how do we go to that? So as I said that we will basically start with one spring system, and then we will see two spring, and then it can actually, by then you will be clear that you can extrapolate it to many body system, many spring systems. So this is what we are seeing. We are assuming modeling linear spring as a finite element. So you see a single spring system, right? Now we have nodes 1 and 2. Displacement at the nodes, we have these displacements, small letter u1, u2, and then the nodal forces F1 and F2, right? And the deflection is, you apply force, your deflection is basically u2 minus u1. So if you have deflection u2 minus u1, then the resultant axial force will be, as we saw previously, F is equal to kx. So basically x is nothing but the deflection displacement. So here we have basically assumed lambda is the displacement, and so you represent it as k times lambda is delta, sorry, delta is u2 minus u1. So once you have that, for equilibrium, you want the forces to, the sum of the forces to be 0 because they are internal forces. They are basically balancing each other. F1 is equal to minus F2. Now, in terms of this equation, forces, you will write F1 is equal to minus K U2 minus U1, F2 is equal to K U2 minus U1. These forces can now be expressed in matrix form as K minus K U1 U2 F1 F2. Now, if you see, this is assuming the same form, K U is equal to F. Basically, K here is your stiffness matrix. This is for one spring element. So now you know how you calculate the stiffness matrix. Now, if we basically take it to a two spring system, now, as I had said that a smaller script basically indicates the internal forces, internal displacement, the capital one external. So now you have two spring system where, I'm sorry, it's more of mathematical terms, but this is, I'm just trying to explain how this works. And I think this is something, even being from medical background, I'm pretty sure that by +2 everybody had actually sort of gone through this spring kind of system. So what you see here, you have two spring now, and now you have say node 1, node 2, node 3, and then you have this F1, F2, F3 as external forces. Then you have this external displacement, U1, U2, U3. Now in mechanics, we make free body diagram, individual one. So now we take this spring. So now in this spring, now you will see there is an internal force. Now we are actually the way we were doing the single spring system. Now it has become identical to a single spring system. Similarly, we have for the other spring. And then we have actually at nodes, because at nodes you notice that we have external forces and then we have internal forces. They have to balance each other. So for node 1, you have F1 and then F1, right? Similarly, at node 2, you have this F2, right? As well as this F2-1 and F2-2 because of this spring and this spring, and then the external force. So once you have that, what you are getting that for each spring, say here K1, here K2, likewise, we have already derived it previously. So we have two simultaneous equations like this, okay? And then you try to assemble, and then here you will actually see U1 is equal to U2 and all. So once you have this, now you see that once you expand, you have these two, and then you sum the member. When you sum it member by member, now in the two spring system, what you are seeing, K1, K2. And then your external U1, U2, U3 is there. In here, your free body diagram tells that F1 is equal to F1, F2 is equal to F2 plus F2. So you are basically substituting that. And then you are basically getting this form. So for two spring system, you have, this is the stiffness matrix. Ask me if you do not understand, but what I'm trying to tell you here is that right now we started with one spring system to tell you, to explain how we basically build the stiffness matrix. Now we extrapolate, extend it to two spring system. And then with the help of free body diagram, in the free body diagram, we have these internal forces, internal displacements, but they are all having a relation with the external forces, external displacement. So we are solving each of them element by element, the way we do in finite element analysis. So we are actually, if you see, we are writing this algebraic equation, this equation for each element, and then what we are doing, we are ultimately adding them together, and then what it does is that even the forces and all this relation, what it is doing is that now you have external forces, now you have displacement value, and the two springs that we were using, now both their material properties are in this matrix. So this is the stiffness matrix for two springs. So it is one spring system, two spring system, you can actually do by hand. Now, if you go back to this particular say slide, now you see there are thousands or maybe more than that number of elements. You cannot solve it by hand, but the computer can do it. So what computer actually does is something that I told you with two. Now it actually can go to multiple number of elements. Of course, the more the number of elements, the more accurate results are, but there is a trade-off because it will consume more computational resources that I will basically talk later. So far I think it's clear how basically it does. So now I have not, because already there were a lot of equations and all, there are numerical problems. This is actually, both these have been taken from a FEA book by David V. Hatton. And now if you see this example, now instead of F1, now you can actually put a rigid structure, like a wall, it is attached to a wall, the way we saw with the bracket. And then, so you have basically some sort of boundary condition. As I said that you have differential equations, some boundary conditions. You have some boundary conditions. Now you know that there cannot be a displacement at node 1. So your U1 will be 0. So, and then with those boundary conditions and input, you can actually find displacement and all. You can actually solve it. Okay, so I think so far I am clear. Now, the advantages is that it can readily handle very complex geometry, and this is the heart and power of FEM. We saw the example of, I started with the example of the bridge, the motion of the lung, then aircraft, automotive. In fact, in my lab, we are actually doing this example of what you say, finite element analysis of human bone, the tibia, how the stress distribution at different points are, because if we intend to make some implant material, what should be the shape, size, where the load should be more, and all those things. Then if we are making some scaffolds, I will show one small video. But before that, let's see the advantages. So it can readily handle very complex geometry, right? It can handle wide variety of engineering problems. I showed that table where you have this elastic, then thermal, fluid, all kind of problems. It can handle complex restraints, right? And it can handle very complex loadings. The disadvantage is that, as I had said, that it approximates the surface, right? So it basically, it is not an exact solution, it is approximate solution, and it has inherent errors. There are some errors that can be there, and many times the mistakes by users can be fatal. So for example, whatever input you give, it's a software, you solve it, you get, you know, this fanciful results, colorful, fanciful results. But for the same problem, you see there are 10 people who have got different results. So there have been some problem on their aspect part in to understand the model, or in terms of say meshing, or in terms of putting the boundary condition, there is some problem. So what can be the mistakes by users? As I said, that there are different kind of matrices, elements that can be selected. So due to time constraint, I am not talking about the elements, but it's just an example that where you want to use a solid element, you have actually taken a shell element. So it is not, it is going to give an error. Then you actually provide support to restrict the motion, but perhaps you have not applied proper supports or loads. So it is giving an error. In the software input, you have maybe put inconsistent unit, SI or something. You have different units, so you have put two different units, and that's why it is giving an error. Too large stiffness differences. Now you see at the bottom, we have solved two spring system. Now suppose a spring constant, or the of one of the springs is very high, making the other one negligible. That's where it will give some errors. And mesh convergence study has not been carried out properly. So, and sometimes you will see there are some errors. So before that, let me show you a video that has been actually made by one of my students. So what we have done is that using bioceramics, we have made a scaffold, and now we want to say in universal testing machine, we have already tested its compressive strength and all. So now we want to see basically whether using finite element, we are able to predict the behavior or those stress values correctly or not. So has it started? So now you see, those who want to play with the software, you have to basically, the first step was you build a model. So using some imaging modality.
We can't
Yes,
see
yes.
the video. We can't see the video.
Okay. Let me just.
I think you'll have to share screen again.
Yeah. I will do that.
Stop sharing and share again.
Yeah, actually it is not taking me. Okay, I am sharing. Stop share. Yes. Share screen. And where did I keep? Just one moment.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
I just need to find where I placed what is, in which directory did I place it.
Okay.
So
May I suggest stop sharing, locate the file.
yeah. So right now I have just put the presentation over there,
Okay.
and I will stop share. Yeah, that actually helps because the system had become very slow.
Yes.
Okay, Abacus. This. Yeah, I have located the file. It's just
Yes.
when I'm copying, it is taking some time. Paste. But so far, whatever I have talked about is uh, uh, sort of clear to all.
Yes, we
Or
got an idea. We got an idea of what is being done, how it is being done. But
yeah, it is more like a black box.
yeah.
So why I mentioned this, because sometimes as I showed that plot, there are 10 different plots that are coming up, but sometimes you are not able to replicate or validate. So you need a means to figure out, and that's why what kind of element you are taking, what kind of load you are applying, whether support is there or not. So those kind of things are uh, sort of important to know. Then only, and that's why after that I am playing this video. It's basically in. Okay, now. So this. Can you see the video? No, not yet.
No, you have to share a screen.
Okay, let me share a screen. iPhone, iPad, files, no, basic, films. Yeah, now I think.
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay. So this is basically going back to this. Using one of the bioceramics, we have prepared a scaffold. Now, using MicroCT, perhaps we have, not perhaps, actually using MicroCT, we have imaged it, slice by slice, lofted it, and we have got this structure. Now, for this, we tested its compressive strength using universal testing machine. But simultaneously, we wanted to predict it theoretically using finite element method. So now there is a commercial software called Abacus where this has been done by my student. So if you remember the steps, the first step was to build a geometric model. So this is the geometric model, right? After that, now you have to create mesh and all those things. And now you will see he has imported the model, right? And then you will see there are different steps. You will have to, those who are actually interested in working on finite element and using softwares, this kind of software, you need to actually play with them. The ideal thing that I would suggest is that there are lot of tutorials. So that's what our students also do. They take those test cases, they try to replicate those results, and while playing with the software, you will basically get to learn a lot. You learn when you do. That's the whole mantra. So now you see that he's trying to see how you are assigning the properties, right? Whether you are taking solid, homogeneous. So what kind of material? Now you are giving the material property, elastic property, what is the Young's modulus, what is the Poisson ratio. So you have those kind of inputs. And if you remember in that schematic, I said pre-processing, where you basically have geometric model, then you have material properties, you have loading conditions and all those things. You will see that ultimately he will actually apply load from different. So you see, so now the load is being applied. So from the top, load has been applied, from the bottom also, and he will rotate it to so that okay, you have load from both ends, because in UTM usually that's what is there. You have the sample, and between both sides, from both sides you are applying load. So if required in future, we can actually have one session like this where, say, one or two of my students can actually tell step by step. This is just a small video that we prepared just to illustrate that, give a glimpse of how you can actually start with a geometric model and do all kind of analysis. So now you see, it is giving you 1 Mises stress, and you will see different regions, right? Even inside. So whichever place you will have more stress concentration, you will actually come to know, okay, those are the places where, it may start failing. The failure may onset from there, or you can say that if at some region you are getting a very high stress value, and then, the kind of load that you are applying, it is exceeding that, it means that the system will fail. So those kind of predictions actually we do. So this was just a small glimpse, and then we come back to the proper slide.
I have a question.
Yes.
So if you said the pre-processing has to be done for the whatever design has been created. So
Yes.
does the ANSYS only do the pre-processing, processing, and post-processing, or you have to use different softwares for the three?
No. And ANSYS can do. Only the thing is that the geometric model, I think that you have to make it using AutoCAD or somewhere. You need to have a geometric model. If you have, say, a product, then the CAD model has to be there, a solid model has to be there. But after that, it is done by the FEA software. This missing and all those things,
And
it can be done.
What does the materialize FEA software do?
Materialize. Say it again.
MIS also has a FEA software.
I think they all basically work with whatever the basic principle that I said. I think they all work with the same set of the
Yeah.
physics or the principle is same. Now for different, I will show you the list of softwares as you had said, and some of like mostly our students work on ANSYS, COMSOL, Abacus. They are basically the paid version, but there are few that are free version also. So I think what happens that based on whatever your application is, there's generic softwares like ANSYS or say MATLAB. They have toolbox and all, so they cater to a generic set of audience or requirements. But sometimes you have a very specific sort of problem. So many people, what they do is that they develop own finite element, package. Or Abacus has something what you call, you can actually write some of your own codes and you plug in. Like many of my colleagues in the department, for their own problems, they basically write and they plug into Abacus. So there are a lot of that kind of things are there. And I think the software that you are referring to, maybe it has more functionality or more function for one particular application than ANSYS, but for other problems, maybe it is not as generic as ANSYS. But they work almost on the same principle. The black box that I actually try to tell with the help of this Spring Mass system. Okay, so introduction. No, this is not the one. Stop sharing. Okay. So let me just come back to share screen.
And do you think it is possible for medical students to play with the?
Yeah, sure. It is entirely. That's why I showed you that particular slide where the students, it is being applied. I just showed one of the examples, but there are a lot of other places where medical examples where actually students are medical students are working on it. Sometimes it may happen that you may get stuck. There may be some problems at some places, but at the end of the day, then you can always refer to some engineers who whose bread and butter is finite element analysis, or who do this as a routine job. So they can easily help you out.
Thank you.
But it's not that it's something that medical students cannot do, because these days when we were students, for everything we had to write code and solve. But with these days, this ANSYS, COMSOL, and even MATLAB, they are basically, they already have come with the functionality that all you need to do is that you need to give some input, you get some output. But the black box is something that we have to be very clear about, because most of the people are not very clear about black box, what actually is going at the back. And that's why I showed you that plot that 10 different results for the same problem were coming. So that is where some idea should be there. So as we said that it is approximate and mistakes by users can be fatal, then we are saying misconvergence was not carried out properly. So let me just talk about what we mean by misconvergence. So what you do is that, say if you have one Spring system that I showed, you can solve it by hand, you get exact solution, right? you even 2 spring system, 3 spring system, something like that. You consider it. So you can actually get an exact solution of a problem. At the same time, you can solve it as a finite element problem, and then you get the solution. Now the thing is that, as I have mentioned, that finite element analysis is basically an approximate method. So it gives approximate solutions. So what you see at the bottom is a simple example. There is a beam, a force is being applied. So now you divide it into 4 elements, which is basically the B. Now these 4 elements will, number of elements will give you, if you see the bottom right, it will give you some solution. You already have solved it, you know the exact solution, right? That is your frame of reference. So with 4 elements, you are getting some solution which is still not very close to exact. Now you basically divide it further. Now from 4 you go to 16 elements. Now you see that the solution is nearing the exact solution. And then you divide it further to 64 and you are very close to the solution, right? So what it is basically is doing is that now if you say go further to 128, I think it will be still, the result may be more closer, but even the closure result will not be very significantly different from what you are getting with the 64 elements, right? Now the point is whether we go with 64 or we go with 128. Remember that if it is more number of element, it will take more computational resources. So we have to actually, it's a trade-off. We have to basically see how many number of elements we want to divide it into and what is the solve time. So that's where your mesh convergence and independence study comes. Mesh convergence is tells basically if we even divide it into more number of elements, if the results are not varying significantly, it means your results are independent of now mesh. Whereas here it is not independent of number of elements. If you see for 4, 16 and 64. So let me just go through it, what it says. So the solution accuracy is judged in terms of convergence as the element mesh is refined as we saw in the bottom example, right? So you can actually do it in 2 ways. One is what we call as H refinement, where what you see, the number of elements are being increased, which is the example at the bottom. There can be another method. You do not change the number of elements, but you change the order of polynomials, which are basically used as interpolation functions, which is basically called P refinement. However, the overall objective is that you need the results to converge, that whatever order you are changing or number of elements you are increasing, say if I go to 128 or I go to 256, the results should be almost, the difference should be negligible, they should almost be same, so that now you know that it is not the mesh, the results are converging and they are independent of the number of elements or the order in the mesh. So it's a very, how do you do the mesh refinement? It's an example taken from COMSOL. You have a very simple, this wrench. Now, what is happening is that you apply load from here. It's made of steel. You apply load from here, and these are the constraints, because the whatever deformation, or if you apply whatever deformation happens, it happens here. If you apply too much of load, you will see it will break. So you want to see the stress distribution. Okay. Now, here you see it has been approximated with this triangular elements, but now you see the size of the element or the number of elements are more. Now you have further refined it, right? And then you have further refined it. So in this case, the results will be more accurate, but computational time will be higher, right? Now you see, as I pose this question, that how do you achieve accurate results while balancing size and solve time of FEM model? So we already saw that we solve it using a series of discrete points, right? And each point or node agrees to adds some degree of freedom. So more than number of degree of freedom, it will take more time to solve, but it will capture the behavior properly. So now if you have too few degree of freedom, so basically then the response would be incorrect. If you have too many, then the model may run for days, because there are so many elements and then you have to put them together. Now, it is very important to mention, because it has happened with one of my students also, that the result was not coming properly. Then what we did was we asked that, okay, what is the, how have you actually meshed it? You saw, so there was an option of auto mesh generation, and ANSYS had basically done it in a very coarse way, something like the top one. And that was, so suppose if you have, say, human tibia and all, so suppose you, here also you can see, if you have a curved surface, right? If you have larger element size, then it will not cover all the curved portions. So there will be, your results will be inaccurate, because now you are not covering the whole domain. But if you see it is, if it is very fine, then it is covering every detail of the curved surface. So basically, in his case, there were too few degree of freedoms, and that's why the results were incorrect. But now if you see, even for a straight case like this, where you do not, which is already capturing all the aspect, if you have this kind of mess, it is basically unnecessarily consuming lot of your computational time. So I think I already told Ms. Convergence how many elements are required to model, so that even if you change the number of elements, it is not, the results are not affected, right? You are getting the repeatable solution, even if you change the element size. And mesh independence is basically when the results are converging, it means it is independent of mesh refinement. So this is a very good example that you can actually see. So there is a rectangular beam with width, depth, and span. And now what you have different cases where you have basically model it using different number of elements, and you are changing elements in these three domains. So basically the number of divisions or number of elements for each across each length, and then you have basically overall the number of elements. So now you see you are going from 40 to 80 to 160, and the number of in case 9 it has gone to 1,22,880. Now if you see, what you are actually interested is in finding the maximum deflection. So we are on the bottom, we are seeing the maximum deflection as well as the solve time. So maximum deflection is, say, right now what we are doing is that we are plotting the maximum deflection with the number of elements in the mesh. So 40, 80, 160, you can actually see over here, and the maximum deflection. So initially, if you see, with the number of elements, as you increase, the results are changing. But as you keep on increasing the number of elements, now you see the results are almost, what you say, become constant. So basically it is converging. Now if you see solve time, if you have just 40 elements, it took only 5 seconds to solve. Whereas when you have 1,22,880, and it is a very simple rectangular beam, the solve time has gone to 3 hours, 5 minutes and 54 seconds. So Basically here the solution has converged. Now with the solve time, if we have the solve time, it is increasing from 5 seconds. Now it has gone to 3 hours, right? So now when you are seeing that the solution has already converged, there is no point increasing the number of say elements, because as you are increasing the number of elements from here to here, you are unnecessarily increasing the solve time, right? So that's why it is saying that this particular, after this, if you are further refining it, it is inefficient because you are getting the converse solution. But and if you're further increasing it, your solve time is basically increasing very high, right? So refinement, so basically refinement past this point is an inefficient application of FEA, right? So mesh convergence was something. Now the question can be that if we are knowing that, okay, curved surfaces should have finer elements, we do not need to have finer elements over here, then is there a way of doing it? So now you see, there are ways. Here you can actually have coarse elements, you do not need that fine, but now you see, this is basically called adaptive meshing. You see, where you do not have these curved surfaces and very standard shapes, you basically get the elements that are not very large in size. Sorry, that are large in size, not very fine. And now at the curved surfaces, to capture the complete geometry, you are actually getting very finer sizes. Even there are some ways manually, but for that you need to get a good hold of the software. You can do manually. So now what people have done here, still you have lot of number of elements. It is manual mesh refining, where the standard rectangle kind of thing, you are making it this way. The other curved surfaces you are actually making this way, okay, in order to generate the result. So now coming to the FEM packages, there are a lot of packages. You have ANSYS, COMSOL, then Abacus, then even Nastran is very famous. I have not used these, or my students have not used, but these are some of the softwares that are the one that are put in green, that are basically the open source. I think they can be used. And then Elmer is something I see very good reviews. So if you are interested, you just need to basically play with them. So to summarize, you have a, that's how an engineer or in general a person approaches a problem. You have a physical problem. You try to basically capture or model the physical problem with the help of some governing equations, some constraints. Once you have that mathematical model, then you basically solve it using some numerical model. Now you get some output, whether the answer makes sense or not. If the answer makes sense, you are happy, you proceed. If no, then you again refine the analysis. You improve the mathematical model, or then you basically do the design improvements or structural optimization. You see the physical problem, you try to capture it properly, and then you basically iterate till you get the solution. So thank you, and thanks all. I see a good crowd of audience over here. I hope it was just basically a 1 hour lecture just to give you a glimpse. I don't know how much successful I was, but I think if you have any doubt, we can always, interact over it. I saw some of the papers where for even dental applications, finite element has been used, but given the time constraint, if I would have used that, it would have made things sort of difficult. That's why I did not put the results of what my students had done. I just put a 4-minute video just to give an idea. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Neeraj. It was good. We got a glimpse of what can be done. I also wanted to know about computational fluid dynamics. Is it also related with something FES sort of thing, or how?
Basically, we have basically we have solid mechanics, fluid mechanics, and all those things. So whatever we talked about, this structure and all, this is solid mechanics. When you have, say, for example, one of my PhD students worked on drug delivery in brain tumor, right? So when those kind of drugs and all pass through, you have the fluid motion, right? But ultimately, we have this different schemes, like methods of solving that. They have their own governing equations, like conservation of mass and all those things, and conservation of momentum and Navier-Stokes equations and all those things. And at the end, again, you solve it numerically, finite difference scheme or some scheme. So here we are predicting the stress and all those things. There we are predicting the, again, different fluid flow parameters, transport properties and all. So they are also in the mechanical domain, fluid mechanics domain. What we talk today is in the solid mechanics domain.
Okay.
But
Because
COMSOL does.
I went through a few articles and they were saying whenever we move the jaw from a place to different, so we advance the jaw or retract the jaw, the airflow is,
yes, airflow. That is basically computational fluid dynamics will actually come into picture. So computational fluid dynamics.
Yeah, that's what
when you are putting some sort of structure, you want to predict its stress, its behavior, whether this geometry is correct or not. If it's sharp, then there will be stress concentration. You basically do finite element analysis, the displacement and stress generation and all those things. During the movement, if there is some fluid that is flowing or air that is flowing, you want to predict those kind of behavior, then you go for computational fluid dynamics, CFD.
And CFD softwares are?
COMSOL. I think ANSYS also does. ANSYS also does. Basically, now, with time, there is no clear-cut boundary. It's something like, let me give you a very, very bad example, but see, we have this North Indian cuisines, South Indian cuisines, right? So North Indian cuisines, everybody would like to buy MDH masala, but MDH also sells sambar powder, right? South Indian cuisines, we actually have MTR. So the authentic, it is something like you get MTR sambar powder. So, but MTR also makes
not India
other masala. So it's something like nobody wants to leave the market. And when, say, I want to purchase software, I would like it to do solid mechanics, fluid mechanics, all sort of problems. So all the softwares now are having these kind of functionalities. It's just that, as I said, that I started with something, so that is my forte. So I can actually do better in that particular. And somebody has forte in, say, it started with CFD software. They have now added solid mechanics and all. So problems can be solved by all of them.
Okay.
And as I said, that there are many open source software. Obviously, they will have more. There will be limitations with the open source softwares, but in many cases they work fine.
So, as per your recommendation, we are thinking of going into purchase of ANSYS. So let's see.
ANSYS, you talk to COMSOL as well. You talk to COMSOL as well.
Okay. So
you basically COMSOL also, these days I am seeing in IIT Kanpur, COMSOL is very widely used by students. It's very popular. We have basically ANSYS, we have COMSOL, and we have this Abacus. Finite element people like Abacus more. Fluid mechanics people like COMSOL more, but even now I'm seeing even solid mechanics people for solving their say acoustics problems and some other structural problem, they are using COMSOL. So maybe it will always be a good idea to talk to both ANSYS and COMSOL. Look at their functionality, look at their pricing, how they are actually doing. And within that also they have different categories in terms of say academic license, research license. You have to be very clear for, like, you also have
Yes, we prefer to
MBBS
go for
programs.
academic license because annual license is a pain.
Yes. So academic license also, they you have to find, they have some strings attached that when you write a paper, you cannot actually say that you generated result from that particular, because that is only for instruction purpose. So we do have academic license for instruction for some of the things, but many faculty members have bought individual license. And sometimes they, what they do is that they give a base pack, and after that, like your DTH and all, you basically have add-ons. So you do not need to buy the whole thing. You can actually buy on top of your base package, you can actually buy the modules that are going to be of your interest. So those are the things. I think you know better than me. I have never negotiated those kind of things, but but
Yep.
I just thought I will.
We'll keep bothering you when we
No,
get
no,
the software.
no problem. It's a
Yeah.
pleasure.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your knowledge with us. And I would like to share a screen and present you a certificate virtually.
Thank you very much. It was nice interacting.
Yeah. So we present you this certificate.
Yeah, only thank you. Only correction is my name is NIRAJ.
Okay,
Though
we'll do the correction.
grammatically you are correct. It should be there is, so it should
We'll
be
make the correction.
NEE.
Yeah,
So
make the correction. Yeah. So I'll mail it to you. And thank
sure.
you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Okay. So can